questions. My name is Celeste again, for those maybe who weren't with us at the very beginning. One of these questions came in and it's about green emerald arborvitae. And this particular plant was planted in March. However, they have these planted in other areas of their landscape for several years, 2 or 3 years. They seem to be doing fine. But in this one particular spot, this tree, they've replanted it 3 times in a row and it continues to die over and over. They've tried to say that they've done some amending to the planting hole and some different things. And every time, shortly after they plant it, it begins to brown and then slowly goes on the decline. And I'm going to say that this is pretty common for arborvitae. We have to be really careful about how we site these in the landscape. And if you have others that are doing well in another area, and you have one specific site where every time you replant, they continue to fail, to me, that tells me this is a siting issue. And it has to do with drainage. So they do not like to have wet feet. And here it looks like they've got some slope. And you're like, well, all the rain is, going down that hill into that lowest spot. But we just have to think about the composition of the soil in this particular area, especially in subdivisions where we've had soil that's brought in. We can have varying soil textures and qualities and composition all throughout one home landscape. And so, what I would say, my advice would be to pull this plant out and to dig that hole out and then to do an infiltration test. You want to make that hole 1 foot deep, 1 foot wide. You want to fill it with water, allow it to fully drain. That's called priming the hole. We're making sure we're at full saturation. And then I want you to fill it again. And now I want you to time how long it takes that hole to drain out. And if we are, if that hole is not drained within 24 hours, that's not going to be an appropriate planting site for this arborvitae. So I'd say let's try an alternate plant. Why do we keep trying to make this same plant do well in a site that we know that it's failing? And we've got some other options. So Taylor is a cultivar of a native cedar, so Juniperus virginiana. It is adapted to a wide array of soil conditions. It can thrive on a rocky, dry soil. It can do moderately fine on wetter, heavy clay soils. It doesn't care which site condition it is in. So that would be my suggestion. A different Let's try a different species of plant, something that can hopefully tolerate these difficult conditions a little better instead of trying to fight nature and make something grow that just doesn't want to be there. So I feel like that would be my best recommendation in that particular scenario. The other one that I wanted to share with y'all um, is a picture of some annuals. So this question asker, they said that they bought these zinnias and some petunias at the same time, planted them in 2 different planters, but used the same potting mix. Um, uh, Planted them at the same time. The petunias are doing well in a separate planter, and this planter of the zinnias has just stalled out. Just no growth. The blooms that were once really beautiful when they bought them, they've begun to fade and they just aren't pushing out any new growth. I can see maybe one new bud right here and a little bit of new foliar growth there. My suggestions are I would do 2 things. This potting mix looks like it has quite a bit of a bark component to it. So I would first want to check and make sure that that is actually holding adequate moisture for these zinnia to thrive. Okay. If you water it and it goes right through and that media is not retaining any moisture, we might want to add some peat in there, or different potting soil to help improve that water holding capacity. The other thing that I think we might want to check, especially since the petunias are doing fine, planted in the same mix, is let's look at the drainage of this container. Look on the underside, make sure it has drainage holes. It may not have drainage holes, and the problem might be that it's just holding water, essentially floating at sometimes when we're been having so much rain lately. This looks like it's out in the open, not underneath a porch. And then And if it doesn't have drainage holes, right, we need to make sure that we get those holes in there. So, several different things to be going on there. I would check those things. I'd give it a dose of a soluble fertilizer. And we're getting into these hot temperatures, which zinnia love, and petunia can thrive in cooler conditions. So, I mean, I can see them performing differently in these kind of milder conditions that we've been having with the cooler days, cooler nights, and cooler temperatures. So, definitely those would be two things that I would kind of take a glance at. And that's all that we're going to have time as far as the question portals go, but we have a guest today. We have a guest in our presence. So, I want to share with you all my screen, and I have not touched him since we began, and he has gotten brave, and he has come out of his bag. For those who may not know what we're looking at, Natalie, can y'all see can y'all see my screen? Okay, good. Well, he's eating his way off of this screen. Let me try to push him back over with a pen. This is a bagworm, y'all, and they are active right now. I can't believe that we didn't have any questions in our question portal about bagworms because this is their active feeding time, and they are covering conifers as well as other deciduous plants. So, once upon a time, we kind of had that really close key plant relationship with conifers, but they've branched out. They're hungry. And so make sure you're checking your Japanese maples, other small ornamental trees and plants because they have widened their diet. And I'm trying to push them over here so y'all can see. But they've already started to create their bag. And so it's hard to see them on the plant because they just look like brown, dead foliage essentially hanging off of the plant. But if you go and stand very closely to that plant and just don't breathe and watch it, you're going to see that entire plant writhing if you have bagworms because right now is their, like I said, their active feeding time. So this particular one, you can't see it because my microscope is zoomed in so close, but there are three clustered all right here together. There's one that's really big, more mature, and two smaller ones right beside it, but they're all still actively feeding. You can see him poking his head out of the end of the bag where he's attached to the stem, and he's just slowly munching away at that foliage. And they can be devastating to your plants in a matter of a week or so. You feel like your plant's fine, you turn around and it's completely brown. So if you're seeing that, make sure you go out and check. Now is the best time to spray. If you have a pretty severe case, this is when they're most susceptible because, see, they are still poking their heads out of those bags. Those bags are waterproof and impermeable to pesticides. So now would be the best time to try to treat these little guys. And I just thought that was super fun. And I'm glad that they showed up because they have been silent this entire time until the very end when they thought I wasn't watching them anymore. And they popped their little heads out right underneath that microscope. So I'm glad y'all got to see that. I'm glad you were here with us today for office hours. I hope you've learned a lot. And don't worry that all the questions that were submitted to the portal, even if we didn't answer them live today, you are going to get responses for those, and are posted on our interactive map. Everybody's going to get a link to that after this session is over. Natalie usually sends those out the next day. And so for sure, go on there, find your location on the map, find your question, and you'll see your question, your picture, and your answer pop up. And this is a map that is interactive and is open to everybody. So share this link with your friends, tell them to check it out to find out what kind of cool things are happening around the state as far as ornamentals and edibles go and what kind of issues they may be seeing. So